Hi everyone, this is Granville D'Souza and you're tuned into Direct Your Destiny. Welcome back. And today especially we'll be focused on emotions that suck your energy. So for example, fear, anger, frustration, irritation, disgust and so forth. But I will be talking about one specific emotion, and that is fear. Now, not everything is going to go our way every single day, right? Some days you're going to have some good days and some days you're going to have some bad days. And when you have those bad days, obviously emotions are going to get the better of you. Now, what we choose to do on those days is what will actually make your day and what will really break your day. So let's talk about specific emotions and how they actually affect your day. Before we get into a specific emotion, let's think about certain examples which could really break your day. So for example, think about your boss. If your boss reprimands you in front of a group of people and he makes you feel small, I don't think you're going to feel normal. Have you been caught up in traffic on certain days, right? You are going to have a meeting in about 1 hour and you think, okay, let me leave about 1 hour, 15 minutes before that meeting. And suddenly you're caught up in traffic. You never expected this was going to happen, and there are going to be some important people in that meeting. And while you're driving, have you had that thought like, oh dear, what are they going to say? What's my boss going to say? What are my different stakeholders going to say? And your mind goes wild. Have you ever lost a deal to a competitor, right? This is quite normal. Losing a deal to a competitor, or losing a deal for that matter. You've worked so long to get the deal and it's just kaput, it just goes away. Have you ever had someone bad-mouthing you, especially it could be your staff, bad-mouthing you to another team member or bad-mouthing to another team lead? And then, it starts to spread like wildfire. How do you feel and what do you do with certain emotions like that? So we are human beings. And again, I would have repeated this in different videos. As human beings, these emotions come, they get the better of you. We're not robots where we can just highlight and delete. It stays. But what we choose to do with those emotions is what really makes us quite different, right? From those who perform well and for those who really struggle. So let's just take the example of fear, because we said we were going to emphasize on fear. And the example I'm going to use is if you're late for a meeting. Now, I have been late for a meeting before. In fact, it wasn't a meeting. It was training. And I was asked to go to a very far side of Singapore, which was going to take 1.5 hours. And I left early, mind you, but I got lost. And I remember to myself, oh no, when I was lost and I knew I was going to be late, and I was going to be 1.5 hours late for training, which has never happened in my life. And at that point, what happens is in your brain, so these stress signals are sent to the limbic part of your brain, which is where the amygdala resides. The fight response, the flight response, the freeze response. And when you're feeling fear, what happens is your brain goes into this brain stew, and it gets locked and lost. Sometimes lost, and sometimes you get to fight mode. So the fight mode I can quote to you was this. I asked myself, only what are the repercussions if I'm late? How are people going to look at me? Am I going to lose the deal? So immediately I got into fight mode, and my fight mode was, let me make a call as soon as possible. But this was done very impulsively, right? Let me make a call to the coordinator. I'm going to be late. So that was positive. The other one was I was thinking, shall I say I can't make it because I suddenly fell ill? Right, so that can be a little bit of a flight response. So your brain goes wild, right? It just goes wild with all kinds of thoughts. And there are different ways we can actually deal with it, right? If we know what happens when we take a pause. And so when you're stressed up, all these brain signals go and they flood and stress you up. And it sends all these emergency signals to your body to respond. So it's good that it allows us to respond and take action. By the same token, if it gets into overdrive, that's when you get stressed up and sometimes do stupid, silly things. Like, for example, speed, right? You start to speed like crazy, you beat the lights, and of course, we can probably endanger other people's lives, right? So taking an example like fear, what can we do when we are in fear mode? That's what I'm about to talk about. I believe we can respond appropriately if we know exactly what's going on in our minds. So whenever an emotion happens to you, remember it is actually telling you something. So for example, what does anger tell you? Anger tells you that something is in your way or somebody's in your way. And of course, that's just a statement. But what's bubbling in your mind is, so what shall I do with this person? So sometimes when we don't follow up with a question, what happens is this bubbling of that statement just keeps going on and it keeps circling. And we need to address it. But sometimes if we don't follow up with a question, then we never quite get to address it, because it's almost like a circling, revolving thought. Now, what happens when you feel fear? When you feel fear, it's like something unknown is about to happen, right? And so you need to ask yourself a question like, so what am I going to do if this happens? And you have to be ready for the fact that it's probably going to happen, right? Now, if it doesn't, that's fine. But if it does, your mind needs to be in that ready space to act. Now, what happens when you experience shock? Now, shock is obviously telling you something like, I did not expect this. Now, if you did not expect this and something has already happened, this is when you have to get into this thought about, okay, so what is the next action step? What happens when you feel disgust? I think quite frequently when you feel disgust, your values have been violated. It's almost like saying, I detest this, I abhor this, and this is not what I'm going to accept. But again, it's still a thought. So sometimes with our thoughts, we need to follow up with the kind of question, and that is, so what am I going to do about this now? What's the next best step? What if I don't address it? And if I do address it, what could the consequences be like? So remember, questions help us to undo certain feelings, provided we ask good questions. If you ask unproductive questions, obviously it's going to go somewhere else, and it does not exactly address the thought that you have, which then affects the feeling that you get. So you need to ask very simple questions like, okay, so what's next? What do I do? Is this going to be appropriate? And what are the consequences of this action versus that action? And then it helps you to slowly get answers. And never be in a hurry for it, because when you're in a hurry for it, you're obviously not going to ask good questions. So remember, the questions are actually quite simple. In James Allen's book, As a Man Thinketh, he says that fear is a horrible emotion. It's an emotion that causes terrible vibrations, and these vibrations actually cause the body to break down. So what can we do when we feel fear? Well, one of his suggestions is to face it head on. So if you face your fear head on, it's almost like saying, okay, this is going to happen tomorrow, and you know what? I'm just going to approach it, and I'm going to face it like a man. Now, of course, that could cause you double fear, right? And the product of fear is anxiety, worry, doubt. So if we don't approach something head on, what happens is it starts to brew, it starts to accumulate, it starts to get much bigger into a larger ball, and then it really causes larger toxicities in the body. So one of the ways is to definitely approach it and think about the worst case scenario, which then helps us to prepare in case that happens as well. So that is quite a radical approach, because it's not easy for anyone to just face it head on, and it really depends on your personality, but that is definitely one of the ways. I must admit that is something I frequently do. And after doing that, I always find that, I'm so glad I approached it, because if I did not, then there'll be a lingering pain, there'll be a lingering worry. Now, you can't always do that with everything, because obviously the fear gets larger with certain things. So think about it. One other way, of course, is to do what I mentioned just now, and that is to ask questions and to reframe, right? What's the rating of this fear? Am I really feeling this? Is this rational? Is this real? If it's not real, then in what way is it not real? Am I in control? Am I not in control? What can I do in a situation where I don't have control, right? If I don't have control, can I just surrender that? But if I have control, what can I do? Who can I ask? Where can I get help from? What resources do I need? Right? So again, it all boils down to what kinds of questions you're asking yourself. So let me give you a real example. Back in March, of course, COVID became a lot more serious, and it affected my business greatly, which I think it has affected many businesses as well. So my fear level was 7 upon 10, because I realized I needed to convert my whole business online, which was a huge task, right? And that's what I did try to do as much as I could. So what did I need to address? Of course, it was all the techie things, the equipment, turning the exercises into more online exercises, turning the games online. The other one is, if I addressed it, what would it look like? Now, quite surprisingly, of course, if I addressed it, it looked like there would have been a lot more opportunities as a result, right? So it turned out well in that sense. If I addressed it, I knew things would turn out to be a lot better. What about the areas I did not address? Now, I can't control exactly when COVID's going to end, but with that 2 upon 10 left, I could look into the situation and ask myself, all right, I've faced this kind of crisis, and I've managed to go through it with a lot of success, and I think it will help me be a lot more resilient in future whenever I face other kinds of crises. So the next time you get an emotion which you are waiting to get rid of, remember it's there for a reason. It gives you sufficient shocks to take action. It makes you feel that kind of lump in your throat. In fact, just when I said it gives you a lump in your throat, I just had one. But when it does, it's actually telling you something. So tune into that message, ask yourself, okay, what's it telling me? What do I need to do? What do I need to address? And always recognize that while you're feeling it, it's always uncomfortable, but there's a message behind it. And when you address it, everything starts to go back to normal. So for the next video, I will address positive emotions, something we love, But I think it's also important to understand that sometimes when we just want positive emotions and we're not able to face some of the difficult moments in our lives, we lead a very unrealistic life. So appreciate both sides because they both give us pleasure and they give us expectation, they give us mystery. So enjoy the whole spectrum of emotions. With that, I hope you appreciated this short little video on emotions. You are tuned in to Direct Your Destiny, and tune into the next one, which is about positive emotions.